Hello, Saskia von Diest. I am delighted to have you here. To all the viewers, um, you know, animal lovers, nurture your pet viewers, please, this is going to be something different. I know we are called Nurture Your Pet, but this time we're also going to talk, apart from our animals, our pets, another incredible, loving, loving, living, sentient being that has been around us all this time, like our animals, this unconditional love that nature brings us. And I wanted to delve more into this. Saskia von Diest. I will introduce you to her and tell you who she is. Saskia is the founder of Ecofluency, an award-winning organization that offers education and consulting in the field of nature communication. All this time, we've been talking about animal communication, but here we're talking about also nature communication. She's also involved in research and activism within this field. An animal communication workshop during her PhD in plant pathology in 2012 sparked her interest in how farmers use intuitive communication with nature to inform practical management decisions. From 2014 to 2020, she held two postdoctoral fellowships at Stellenbosch University, South Africa, and at Coventry University, UK, to investigate intuitive farming as part of a wider new field of subtle agroecology. Throughout her postdoctoral years, she further developed her own understanding and practice in communicating with trees, animals, land, nature spirits, and ancestors. She's also trained as a family constellations facilitator in Jikiden Reiki and in the Way of the Warrior Healer for psychic surgery. Saskia, welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the first time I have a guest that's going to talk about nature. So I heard you speak. Now, I'm a huge tree hugger, okay? I grew up with a lot of pets in my house in the Caribbean, in a yard. But when I was an only child, obviously lonely in the house, but I had my pets. But what I loved doing since I was 5 years old, was climb the trees in my backyard and sit in one of the big branches and take a book or, coloring pencil, just color or just scribble. And I would do that as a little kid, not realizing that the tree, actually I could communicate with the tree, and not realizing why I loved being in that tree. So obviously there was an exchange of energy going on because I just loved it. I'd always gravitate towards these trees in the backyard. And obviously, as I grew older and a bit wiser, I hope, I started reading more. I started reading more about nature and the wisdom that these trees have. So what I often do, Saskia, when I have a real difficult time, I disappear. I go into the forest in the mountains in Canada and I spend about a month. I'm very lucky and I love going for these walks because I live in Hong Kong. And you live in this amazing country, South Africa. I can't get enough of it. I wish I were there with you right now. My soul is in South Africa. What a country. But I lived for the last 37 years in Hong Kong. We do have nature. I have to say, I can't complain. We do have nature, but you have to go out and really look for it. And it's not just, outside my doorstep. I live on the 32nd floor of these apartment buildings. So the closest I can get to nature on a daily, whole day basis would be plants in my house. And that's good enough too. That's good enough. The power in a plant is massive. But Saskia, I would love for people to remember again how important it is whenever we have problems and you go for a walk. Why is it that you feel so good? What happens? So I would love welcome and I would love for you to start with, can you explain what nature communication is in your own words and how is it different from simply appreciating nature, like sitting down looking at trees? What is that? What is the difference? And what is it?
Thank you, Nita. Thanks so much for the opportunity to share about this. So, firstly, what I want to clarify is that coming from an academic background and being what I call a recovering academic, it helps to give context to the different ways that this term can be known about, can be understood before I get into what it is. So, in the latest academic research, it's known as intuitive interspecies communication.
Right.
So that's what you might find if you were to look in, for example, research that's done at the University of Saskatchewan in Canada, University of Liège in Belgium, um, and University of Cape Town, for example. There are people doing research in this field, brilliant research. And previously, it's been known as animal communication, and it still is. It's known as communication, intuitive interspecies communication. Um, and I call it nature communication because it goes beyond using our intuition. It goes beyond even just communicating with other species. It goes to being able to, it speaks about communicating with any aspect of the entire universe.
Mm.
So I'll get into that, but let me maybe backtrack and say that when people ask me what it is that I do, and I answer that I teach and I consult in nature communication, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I love nature. I talk to my pets and my plants all the time." And so then I'll often reply, "That's fantastic," because it means that you then recognize that they understand you, that they have a consciousness. But how often are you able to actually hear what it is that they are saying? And then some people will just look at me blankly like, "Oh, you can hear what animals and plants are saying." And it's like, yes, as well as microbes and rivers and volcanoes and your ancestors and the stars and nature spirits and everyone else in the entire universe
And
too.
the moon? And
Everyone, the moon and the sun and the earth herself, everyone. Because in an animist worldview, the entire existence is perceived as conscious. So nature then includes everyone in the universe, and everything becomes everyone. Like whether it's the desk that your computer's sitting on, for example, or those bricks around the fireplace. Every aspect of existence has consciousness imbued in it, and this is something that's shared. This worldview, this ontology, this perception of reality is shared with by every indigenous culture worldwide
mhm.
and many spiritual traditions as well. So now that I've described that, I also want to say that everyone can do this because humans are nature too. Obviously, we're born of the earth, we drink the water, we breathe the air, we eat the food, we interact with all of nature all the time. So I'll talk about communication with the rest of nature often to emphasize the point that it's not humans and nature, it's humans and the rest of nature. You are nature
Mm.
itself. And so then it's an easier step to remember that it's a skill that you've just forgotten that you have, because then it's perfectly ordinary. It's perfectly natural. And it's something that our ancestors used to survive, to evolve, and to thrive in changing environments because they knew how to ask and to listen to the wisdom and intelligence of all of nature. So it's now, I mean, you could say that it's also the foundation of what is known as shamanic practice, even though I tend to
Mm.
avoid the word shamanism because of its cultural appropriation. Um, and but the principle of it is really that this practice, this is what underlies all spiritual traditions, all indigenous cultural practices, as far as I can tell. Because we're all born with this inherited capacity, right? And now more than ever, people are waking up and remembering that
Correct.
they can reclaim the power of this. And I believe that we have a responsibility to do so because it's how we're going to be, again, co-creating our future in true alignment with the rest of nature. And I say again because this is something that we have done eons ago and we forgot for a while.
Why? Why
So,
did we forget it? Why? It wasn't our ancestors. And when you see the indigenous people in movies, at least I've, haven't met them, but in the movies and how they communicate with the whales and the sea life. And why did we forget that, Saskia?
it's probably a conversation that's bigger than the scope of this particular chat,
Yeah,
um, because it really depends on what's your starting point, what's your worldview, what's your perception of human history.
correct.
And so, what I will say that is that we have forgotten because of Western reductionist materialist science, predominantly in the last few hundred years. But also, there's been an active suppression of these ways of being, these ways of knowing by
Mm.
various religions worldwide for thousands of years.
Okay.
And whether because this can become quite a tricky conversation. And I've given up trying to not given up, but I've given less attention
Hmm.
to why it is we've forgotten, and I've given
Hmm.
more attention to how do we remember.
How? Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So,
So that leads us to, how does nature communication actually work? What's happening between the human, and the natural world? What's actually
okay,
happening during that exchange?
okay, okay. All right. So first I should say that there's a piece that I want to add to what is
Hmm.
nature communication because then it helps to explain the answer that I'll give to your next question. So in the first time that I published about ecofluency, it was in an academic publication. And I describe it as being a science and art and a magic of being able to dialogue, meaning it's not just one-way communication. You're not speaking just to, but you're listening to as well, with any aspect of nature, and you're using a wider range of senses and awareness. So it's about being able to listen with more of yourself so that you can hear what the entire universe is always wanting to share with you. And so, like a radio, it's about attuning to the right frequency to be able to chat with a tree or a bird or a whale or a mountain. It's like having the right telephone number to pick up and call. And so the information comes through in many different ways, whether it's thoughts and feelings, emotions, sensations in your body, um, to intuition, imagination, dreams, synchronicity, signs in nature. And when we sing and we dance and we activate the instruments of our bodies to join the symphony of the universe, then it gets really exciting. But most people starting out will have a combination of clairvoyance, so that's being able to see without your eyes,
Hmm.
clairaudience, which is being able to hear, and it'll sometimes come across as voices in your head that sound either like your own voice or somebody else's voice, but it's different to you chatting to yourself. There's a difference, a slight nuance difference. And then some people also have this combined with claircognizance, which is just knowing without knowing how you know. So some people describe that as intuition. And then you can also develop, or some people have a natural ability already, clairsentience, which is being able to feel clearly. They'll just get a feeling in their body. Clairalience, which is getting sense of smell, but it's not a physical smell. It's like the memory of a smell, but it's how an aspect of nature, especially animals, will show you, like with food, this is what it smells like. And suddenly you'll just be able to smell something like pet food, and you'll be like, whoa, but there's no pet food in front of me.
Hmm.
And the same is true with taste. You'll be able to taste based on your frame of reference what is going on. So, what I should say is that because we as humans are nature, we already are nature communicators. So, well done. You're already at foundational level.
Right.
And now, yeah, and there are as many ways to communicate with nature as there are people alive today, and more. And it's just a matter of figuring out what is the method that you can hear
Hmm.
other beings more than human beings,
Hmm.
and how do you develop that? So
Hmm.
most of the time, and you can develop these skills,
Hmm.
and I know because I had to do that. It's
Hmm.
if I can do it as a recovering academic, so can you. dear listener. And most of the time these days, what I'm doing is I'm acting as a translator. So
Mhm.
um, I'm basically just the person who has your animal on the phone, and I'm like listening to what you're saying and I'm relaying it. But it's happening much quicker than if you were to have a verbal conversation. And then it's also possible to channel or even be a medium, but I tend to avoid being a medium because I want to retain, control of my own consciousness as much as possible in the interest of psychic sovereignty. So when you ask how does nature communication actually work, what is actually happening in that? There's an exchange of information, but I've not met a single human who can say exactly what is the underlying mechanism of how it works. So, in beings who have physical bodies, it could be anything from like quantum entanglement, an exchange of electromagnetic frequencies, perception of biophotons, quorum sensing between the microbiome of your own body and another being, or all of these. And then in beings who don't have physical bodies, I'm not 100% sure exactly how that works. But ultimately, what I believe, and it's probably something that many spiritual traditions have described for the longest time, it's one fragment of the collective consciousness seeing itself in another fragment, like mirrors. So to if one person, let's say, is looking at how I'm communicating, most of the time it's going to look like I'm just sitting and meditating because a lot of my consultations, I'm I'm tuning in and it's telepathy most of the time. It's like I'm hearing without it being verbal or audible. And and often I'll say things out loud to for the client's benefit so that they can hear what I'm saying to their animal, their plant, or their garden, or their farm, or their landscape, or their body, or their ancestors, whoever they've booked me to communicate with them.
Mhm.
Um, and then I'll relay the information. So then that will come as a mixture of I'll listen and then say what I get. Um, or it will move a little bit more into channeling, but it's not channeling where I'm being taken over by the being. I'm relaying in real time what I'm getting.
Mhm.
So I'm sending thoughts, images, feelings, sometimes expressing emotion, and that's also what I'm getting back.
Getting back. Correct.
Yeah.
And so you do this for other people. So people can
Yeah.
contact you, and if they have
Yeah.
blockages, for example, and you do cleansing, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Saskia von Diest. We have a little viewer here, a little, he's not a guest, he's a
Oh my
viewer,
gosh.
and he's been wanting to hear what you have to say. He's been
Well, he's
walking
very
in and
welcome to
out of this
join.
room constantly. And let me tell you. So, Nicolino is 17 years old. Okay? He's been with me through thick and thin, and he's getting there. But we communicate a lot because I am into animal communication. But as much or as much as
Mhm.
I walk among the trees, sorry that, I'm putting this conversation in the middle of your beautiful explanation of energy uh, cleaning. Um, when I walk among trees, I've really not given it any thought apart from hugging them and sitting there to actually listen to them. What do you have to say to me? So that's where I really love your wisdom on that. So let's continue with cleansing, the energy blockages. So you were explaining that.
Yeah. So what I've often found is that in a person's energy field, there will be certain things that we pick up in the same way that on a physical level, you accumulate dirt just because of everyday life, right? And that also happens on an energetic level. So, especially if you're going to be having strong emotions or you're going to be visiting um, a public transport hub, for example, or um, something quite extreme, like going to hospital, um, or you go through a traumatic experience. or travel. That's all going to mean that you're going to have like psychic debris building up in your energy field. And now there is obviously a natural cleansing that happens to a degree with that, especially if you have your own practices that are, can be affected through physical practices like exercise and sweating and lymph drainage and, those kinds of things,
And breath
strong
work
breathing.
and breath work,
Breath
right?
work is a very excellent way of cleansing your energy field and your mind because various reasons. I won't go into it. I think you kind of get the sense of it. But now sometimes there'll be, in the same way that we can brush our teeth on a daily level, on a daily basis, and we're cleaning it to a certain level, there'll be stuff that we also miss.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you'll find that you need to go to the dentist because there's stuff that you can't get to yourself. And now I'm basically like the dentist in that case.
Correct. Oh, I love that. I
I'm
love
able,
that explanation. That's a good one.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
because you can look after yourself as well as possible, but then sometimes you need to go to a specialist because it's the same like you can, look after your car and service it on a regular basis, but stuff happens. It's perfectly natural. So what I do is I am not doing the energetic cleansing personally.
Mm.
I just know who to ask within nature's intelligence and wisdom to do the job, and I'm coordinating, facilitating, and orchestrating that field within which the healing happens, and it's the client doing the healing. Whether it's a human, whether it's an animal, whether it's a body of land, it's it's the client doing the healing, and I'm just helping. I don't never call myself therapist or healer or shamanic practitioner, even though the work is naturally therapeutic. It is naturally healing. But I want to position myself very clearly and say that at best I'm a translator and I'm a facilitator because then the client and their animals and their land and their bodies are empowered to know that they have this capacity in them. And I've seen this happen. Like, for example, um, a client of mine she has a daughter who had really severe scoliosis at the age of 12, and she's in New Zealand. And by the way, I'm allowed to share this information, and her testimonial is on the Ecofluency website under the energy field clearings. So her daughter had really severe scoliosis, and she was booked to have surgery for that scoliosis a month after the initial consultation with me. And when it came to the consultation, I could see that there was quite a lot of stuff in her field. So I said to her, look, I recommend that a clearing is done um, before the surgery. And so we booked her in for the following week. And a clearing was done where I facilitated that. And this is all done offline. It's done remotely. Like you can see part of my altar over there. It's very basic. And so I will sit there and I'll create a ritual space for the clearing to happen. And call the person's energy field in, and then the work starts. And I could see that there was quite a lot going on in her field. And I have like quite a forensic level protocol that I usually go through, although sometimes it will be quite spontaneous and the protocol goes out the window and there's a different method depending on what the client needs. And so a whole bunch of stuff was removed from her energy field. 2 weeks later, and the daughter was quite naturally moving in a mode like she was doing things in her life that showed she was moving towards transformation. Like without being asked, she was starting to reorganize her room. She was starting to do things slightly differently. And then 2 weeks later, um, she had the pre-op scan. So this the scan they do shortly before the actual operation, and that's spinal surgery. That's quite intense, right? And what the scan showed is that not only had the scoliosis stopped, but it had started reversing.
My God.
And the surgeons couldn't understand what was happening. And they said, well, we can't explain this. And we don't know what you're doing, but whatever you're doing, it's working. We're going to postpone the surgery indefinitely. So they did that. And about a year and a half later, she did end up having surgery. But what I'd seen in the consultation is that if they had done the surgery at the time that it had originally been booked, there would have been complications that would have affected, especially her lower body development and her reproductive system. And she was prepubescent. So it would have really affected her development. And there's stuff that would have just been missed, not because of anything the surgeons did consciously wrong, but just a series of circumstances. And so because it happened at a later time, her energy field was more ready. The surgeons were able to get a clearer picture of what was going on, I believe. And the surgery ended up being a success. And now you wouldn't be able to tell that this beautiful young lady had scoliosis at all, and it was very severe in her spine, in two places, in upper and lower spine.
How
So
many
that's an
sessions?
example.
Wow. And how many sessions with you did it take, the clearing?
One consultation and one clearing.
Okay. I'm next.
Now,
I'm booking a consultation with you. No, 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 I'm serious. I'm booking one. I think you've got your
what I
work
want
cut out for you, Saskia, with me. Yeah, I think you're gonna have
what
to
I
take a lot of vitamins before you become the facilitator to cleanse my energy blockages.
what I what I want to say is that this was one case. There have been other cases with clients where they haven't felt a difference in their life, or the difference that's happened in their life hasn't been what they had initially expected. They just feel better, but they don't know how to explain it. Um, so that, I mean, I've had a few, whether it's like somebody's autistic child, whether it's their fertility journey where they couldn't fall pregnant and then they could. I do have cases that seem that are what you could think of as miraculous healing. Because within nature communication, literally your imagination is the limit. If you believe that, whether you call it God, goddess, divine, universe, the creator, if you believe that that aspect of our cosmos has all the power, and you believe that it's possible that that power can be brought about, that can bring about change in your life that is inexplicable to Western science. If you hold that worldview, then that can happen in your life.
Correct.
I've had that happen in myself. I've had, like, my womb used to be a particular shape. It was heart shaped, which supposedly is like, I thought, oh, that's so cute. No, a bicornuate uterus means that it's an abnormality, and you cannot change that unless you have surgery. And I went through a series of clearings for myself that I did, and I journeyed with the spirit of the plant spirit Rose, and a bunch of other plant spirits as well, as part of my own healing journey, without expecting that I was going to change the shape of my uterus. That wasn't the goal. My goal was just to make sure that my womb was clear. Not because I was intending to have children. In this life, I've chosen not to because my work is my calling, and that's, my work serves all children of all species. And I'm happy with that decision. But I knew that there was something going on with my womb, and I wasn't sure. So I did a series of clearings over a period of about 2 years. And then I went to the gynecologist, beginning of last year, I think it was. And he said, oh, you have a normal shaped uterus, like a pear shaped or flask shaped uterus. So it's round at the top, not dented. And I was like, what? No, that doesn't sound right. And he was like, why are you upset with what I'm finding? I'm like, I'm not upset. I just wouldn't have expected that because I thought that I had a bicornuate uterus. That's what my previous gynae told me. And she'd been my gynae throughout my 20s. She used to teach gynecology at university level. Like she was,
Mhm.
for um, she was a very well-known, she is a very well-known gynecologist in the country. And so he didn't believe it, what she'd found. And I went back to her and I asked her, and she didn't believe what this gynecologist had found. And so I compared what they had both found. And it was like neither of them believed that the only explanation was that something might have shifted in my body. They both believed that the other was wrong. But I have the scans of the most recent scans, and I have my previous gynae's notes where she even drew a little heart to describe my womb like many years ago. And all I can say is that if a body's if something in the human body can physically change, it sounds like miraculous healing. It sounds like impossible change, but it is possible because we aren't set in stone. Sometimes physical intervention is needed, obviously, because sometimes, like if you have a broken bone, I'm going to expect that you want to go to the hospital and splint it. If you've been in a car accident, God forbid, then you want to make sure that you get the necessary medical attention. But the healing journey can be so much accelerated, whether it's from something extreme like that, or whether it's from a chronic illness, or whether it's from something else, like a mental health challenge. That can also be addressed through working with nature communication, because all it is trusting that nature has our best interest um, at heart,
Mm.
universe's heart. And we need to know how to ask and listen. And that's why I focus so much on teaching now, is because I want to be able to empower people with these
Right.
skills
So,
themselves.
so we can do this ourselves for ourselves, correct?
Yes,
So,
yes.
Saskia, I liked the analogy that you gave of the radio frequency. Let's say I want to listen to opera, it's a certain frequency, and I want to listen to rock, another. You have to tune it in. I am quite familiar with the quantum field. I've studied it. Actually, 30 years ago, I was going to the Himalayas. I had my master who, over 30 years ago, taught me meditation. So started with that, then, got more into energy, how we're all energy, and went deeper into that. So your analogy is so important. I do what I on myself is energy healing with the pulse electromagnetic frequency device, the PMF for myself. But I was really enlightened when you spoke about communicating with nature. And here's my question. Let's say for just a layman like all of us, right? And we haven't studied or practiced yet. So how different will it be now for me when I walk now in a park or in a garden and I see a tree, just hugging it? I come away feeling so yummy. But would I now just naturally try and just talk to the tree, not necessarily with words, but in my mind? You feel slowly, if I practice this, I can hear the tree saying something back to me.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely could. That's many people have had spontaneous experiences like that. So I would say that, remember, I said that there's many ways of communicating with nature. There are people alive today and more. And some people will specialize in communicating with plants and trees, and others with animals, others with nature spirits or landscapes. I think of myself as a generalist. So I started out with animal communication, but I've since developed my skills to be able to communicate with anyone. And unlike many other nature communicators, I didn't grow up knowing how to communicate with nature on this level. Okay. So maybe I should share just a little bit of my background so that people
Please.
know like the journey I went on, because then it gives context of like, why do I speak the way that I do
Yeah.
about this? So I had an irreversible shift in my own worldview during an animal communication weekend workshop about 14 years ago. And I was in the middle of my PhD. So I was doing a PhD, and then obviously in my off time, of which there was very little during a PhD. And I was doing it in plant pathology. So I was studying agricultural plant diseases. And then just by chance, there was a friend's birthday, and I went to their birthday party, and there was somebody there who I already knew for many, many years, friend of a friend, and she was describing how she'd been to an animal communication weekend workshop as well, and that's what sparked things for me. She told me these stories of literally in a day or two, she learned the skill to the level that she could take it home and practice. So I thought, wow, that's astonishing, because I'd wanted to be a scientist since I was 6 years old. So when I heard about this concept, um, it was like it took a lot of convincing for me to get over it. I read every book that I could find, and just to wrap my mind around the possibility of doing this. So for me personally, it was a lot of a mental block that needed to be gotten over. And so finally I booked myself onto a weekend workshop myself, but it took a whole year to get to gather the courage to have my to gain my own experiential evidence of this. Because I thought there could be scientific articles that I read about this. I could hear other people's stories, but ultimately it's still going to stick in my mind like something that's only reserved for a few special people or maybe comic book superheroes.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be like, how do I have an embodied experience that nobody can take away from me? If I can do that myself, that's the only way I'm going to be convinced. So during this weekend workshop, I had my own multiple direct experiences of conversing telepathically with animals through photographs, not in person. And I was able to receive information that I could never have known about them, but then could validate afterwards. And this is what shocked my science molded mind. But if that shock was twofold. The one was not only could every single one of like the 40 people in that workshop do this, but I hadn't actually realized how lonely I was until that point in my life. I had what looked like a perfect life. I was engaged at the time and I was on track to finishing my PhD and getting a fantastic job. And I had a great circle of friends. And I thought I was happy. I hadn't realized how deeply sad and lonely I actually was. And my entire life changed from that point onwards. Um, and it was in accepting that this was an ordinary skill that we'd forgotten. It's like I found enchantment and wonder again. So then I ended up leaving. Um, well, it was a mutual parting actually with my partner at the time, my ex-fiance, that broke apart because I became too weird, and very grateful for that. And I also finished my PhD and didn't go and get the job with a multinational agrochemical corporation, and instead ended up doing these postdoctoral research fellowships to investigate intuitive farming because I was curious now, how can farmers use the skill? And
Mm.
if they can do it, then we can affect change on an ecosystem level. And farming is the one place, it's the interface that we have the biggest, it's the biggest interface we have with the rest of nature. Our food, a lot of some of our fuel, the fiber for our clothing, um, water, so much is involved with farming. Everything is involved with farming and food. So I was like, that's where I want change to happen, which is why I now still work with landscapes more and more actually.
Mhm.
Anyway, so then it was through my postdoctoral years that I ended up developing my own skills. And for some people, even though I'd had this success in the weekend workshop, it took me years to be able to see nature spirits, for example, and then to develop my skills with plants and trees. So it was through this patchwork series of training. I had to work really hard at it, you know. It's like, yes, some people have a natural talent, and we all do have different levels of ability. Everyone has the skill because it's part of our blueprint of being human, and everyone can learn it. And some have more of a talent for it, like an athlete or an artist. And but as with any skill, hard work can count for more than talent. So I've had this journey of many years to developing my skill to the level that it is now because I really wanted to develop trust and accuracy and confidence in my skill, especially if I was going to be charging money for it, because there's big risk involved if this kind of work at times. Um, and if I was going to be teaching it. So now the way that I teach it is I encourage people, however they want to start, that they do it that the way that feels best for them. Some people don't like a very structured approach. I teach a structured approach, and I don't call it a protocol. I call it a set of guidelines. And so I'll teach a 9-step set of guidelines in my foundational work because then what is built into that is practicality, safety, and efficiency. Because when you're opening yourself up, like I was describing earlier on with an energy field, you're becoming more vulnerable. You're needing to open yourself up in order to listen. But in doing so, one also needs to make sure that let's say the conversation is encrypted. So how do you do that? How do you make sure that you're not having somebody else hijack your conversation?
Yeah.
So that's part of what I teach, now. And not many people will focus on that when they're teaching nature communication, but I choose to do that because I found personally out of, experience that it's actually really important. So now that's That's a part of the way that I teach. So if I were to say to somebody, and I know this is a long answer to the question, but it felt like it was necessary
Take
to
your
give
time.
context.
Take your time because
Yeah.
you're going in depth and that makes us understand it better. What you're saying, you're
Mm.
leaving, you don't leave us with still questions in our mind. So thank you for that. Yeah.
So when somebody wants to communicate with a tree, like you were describing, you want to go to
Yes.
the park and start. On my website, there are a series of free exercises. So
Great.
if you go under resources, and they're not super in depth, but for the very beginner who's never actively, consciously done this before, that's
Mm-hmm.
a good place to start if you don't yet feel confident enough or feel like it's for you yet to start doing
Yeah.
this in a course.
Yeah.
So you could start to breathe with a tree, for example. You could just notice what's happening in your body before you engage with the tree, and then when you do start engaging with a tree. And noticing what the changes in your body is an important key in activating the body as listening instrument. So you're gauging what is my baseline reference and then what shifts, because the shifts in the entire body, in the energy field, is also how nature communicates with us. It might be that you suddenly have a thought dropping in your mind. And it's like that could be a message from the tree. But until you know what is your baseline and how to actively start communicating, it can feel tricky. And so for some people, this happens really spontaneously. They've never forgotten what it's like since they were a child. And
Yeah.
I've had a lot of people come to me afterwards when I've done talks or when I've done anything. Like they'll come to me afterwards and quietly be like, I've never stopped. And I'm like, great.
Oh, that's
That's exactly
great.
what I want to hear.
Yeah.
But there are many people like myself who forgot and had to actively reclaim this skill. And so, yes, you can go to the park and just allow yourself to be, because nature communication is quite paradoxical. It's almost more about unlearning what we think we know as it is about learning something new.
Yeah.
What I teach in my coursework with Ecofluency is that I'll teach you certain skills.
Mm-hmm.
And it can sound like a lot of information, but really it's as much about just remembering how to be. It's a remembrance, ultimately. It's a remembering how to be, that you are part of nature, you are looked after. You're not letting go of your sovereignty, you're not letting go of who you are. If anything, you're becoming more of yourself. You're learning to be the truest expression of your eternal spirit. And that comes from slowly removing all the defense mechanisms and the old belief systems and the ways of knowing that we might have had previously, so that it can make way. It's like peeling off the blinds from your eyes and starting to awaken the body, kind of like shrugging off dust from oneself. And in that way, you become a clearer listening instrument, but you're also a clearer vessel to be able to shine back like a mirror, shine back to the rest of nature and the rest of consciousness what is going on. And in this way, we are part of the collective evolution. It's co-creative evolution. And people say to me, like, but okay, if I wanted to access the entire wisdom of the universe, why couldn't I just ask my highest self or God or creator, whatever, the divine? And I'm like, great, you could do that, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that. Personally, I have learned that the rest of nature really benefits from us communicating with them. In the same way that if you lived in isolation and you just focused on your spiritual development, that's great for you. But it's in the alchemical tension of relationship, whatever the relationship is, like many people as listeners have experienced with animals. It's the beauty, the love, the trust, the tension, including the challenges that come within relationship, which is how we grow. And the same is true for the other being. It's actually the trees and the plants have taught me this, that they learn so much from being in deeper relationship and conversation with us.
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, everyone's seen how when you put two plants next to each other and you talk to one, water one, and you water the other one also, but you don't talk, there's a difference in how the plant grows. But today I heard something very beautiful in the morning by Eckhart Tolle. He says when you look at a flower, right, and you actually look at it intently and you think, oh, you're so beautiful, you're experiencing that flower in your mind. What a beautiful flower. The flower now gets to experience itself because you're
Yeah,
experiencing the flower gets to experience itself. And I think that applies to all living
yeah,
beings. The rocks, your
yeah,
pets, for sure. I mean, look at this little guy, he's nurture, he needs that. Um, but that never occurred to me, and I don't know how. I just thought, okay, this tree, he's lived couple of hundred of years and gone through snow and rain, and he has all the wisdom and he has it all. I did not realize, apart from needing sunlight and, of course, hydration, water, that how much these trees in the forest need to be experienced and appreciated by us, by even the bugs that go on it, or the other trees around it, how these trees gravitate to each other, feed each other through the roots. So they're not unlike us. They need us
mm,
as much as we need them, Saskia. And that is so wonderful, the way you described it. And it reminded me what just this morning I I heard about from Eckhart Tolle, saying that online. Not that I know him, but saying it online. Um, how beautiful is that? I mean, you now make me want to go out there and actually even today just look at a tree differently. Saskia, you talked about the farming. How beneficial this is. What you started doing. Loneliness. You shared with us honestly and authentically how you felt when you started animal communication and then realized how lonely you were. But now here's the opposite. Loneliness has become a pandemic. People already know they're really, really, really lonely. It's a pandemic. And like Mother Teresa says, loneliness is the biggest disease. Imagine way back, she said that. Loneliness is the biggest disease on earth. And right now, it has reached, I mean, it's gone beyond. And we all have these bouts, but some people are having chronic. So, what had struck my mind was, what if kids, especially the kids, the youth, they feel not heard, they're bullied, they're lonely, they don't have the friends, or they're alienated, parents are working, not necessarily their fault, they're not giving the attention that the child requires because they're also busy with their own, struggles. I mean, isn't this a wonderful way for kids when they come home? And let's say if they don't have a pet. If they have a pet, great. You have the animal communication. If they don't, even if they have a plant or go out near a tree and speak to a tree, this benefits the children and helps them in their loneliness, right? Yeah. And how?
So children already naturally do this way better than adults.
Okay.
And they will have imaginary friends, for example. So they
Yeah.
find ways and imaginary friends are not necessarily beings who they make up.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is the product of their imagination, and a being comes into formation in the astral world as a result of their thoughts. So it's a thought form that gets created. Sometimes they're just actually perceiving someone who's already there, who's shown up and can be supportive. Sometimes it's a member of their spirit team, or like a guardian angel who's there and is keeping them company. I have taught children before in sort of private workshops that I've been requested to do.
Mhm.
And I've been astonished at, firstly, how phenomenally quick they are at remembering the skill because they've not had as many years of it being pushed down as adults have had. And
Yeah.
secondly, how not only how quick they are, but how they see so much more, they feel so much more, which is perfectly natural.
Yeah.
But for those people who, those young people, like teenagers
Yeah.
and the youth that are in their 20s, Gen Alpha and Gen Z now, I would say that they would benefit a huge amount from this. And that's part of my goal. My dream with Ecofluency is to make nature communication a household concept and practice.
Yeah.
So part of what I'm doing now is putting together proposals for funding so that I can develop educational material that can go out, whether it's through schools, whether it's through an app, something that's accessible to as many
Yeah.
people as possible,
That's
so
fab.
that they can
Yeah.
get access to this, whether
Yeah.
it's through me or whether it's through somebody else, because I also do promote the work of other people in this field. Not everybody resonates with the way that I teach, and that's okay. I
Right.
want people to just do the thing.
Yeah.
So if children were to have access to this, I believe that they would feel more confident in themselves. They would know that they are supported because many people have parents who they don't feel have been fully there for them.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless, there's zero judgment from my side about
Mm-hmm.
what the situation of that is. But we all have nature parents. We all have aspects of the universe who've been assigned to us. Every one of us are born with spirit teams, for example, with guardians, with guides, with allies, and some we will know and some we will never know. Some we will get to meet, and this is part of what I teach is allowing you to be introduced to. I'm not the one allowing you. It's like there's a field that gets created, and then you make the introduction yourself to meet a member of your spirit team, and that's like finally getting to know the beings who have been there for you all along. And it's their job to do that for you. That that's what they're assigned to do, and that's what they want to do. And so for children to have access to them would be, to be more consciously aware of them would be phenomenal. I think I've always thought that nature communication is one of the things that's going to fix the world.
Spot on. Spot on.
Yeah.
Especially when I feel loneliness, with loneliness, which is such an excruciatingly painful emotional experience. And we all know the amount of medication that's going around, and how these kids are everywhere medicated. I'm not saying that they don't need it. I don't know. I don't know that. But what if the healing the healing value of nature, interspecies, all other living beings, like you say, right? That value, that's now being explored and respected and looked into more seriously, how much beautiful would that be? The whole consciousness level, all of us,
Mm.
how, like you say, co-creating that. These are words that resonate with me because I have been looking into this myself. But Saskia, your work is very valuable in so many ways. Mainstream is always animal. Not everyone can have a pet in their house because that's a lot of responsibility. But nature is out there. It's free, and we need to take
And we
advantage of
forget that
that.
we,
Sorry?
absolutely. What we forget is that we are nature. So even if you were in prison, for example, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but there, even there's an opportunity to deepen your relationship with the rest of nature. The materials of the buildings surrounding you are made from materials of this earth. Your gut microbiome contains a greater number, like something like, depending on which scientific study you look at, like 10 times the number of bacterial cells in your gut alone to human cells in your body. You're
Wow.
an entire ecosystem in itself. You have all of these beings around you. You have other dimensional beings who you can access. This is what I realized was like if I were on a desert island on my own and I managed to survive, I wouldn't feel lonely anymore because I'd be able to have a conversation with the sand itself, with the sun and the sea and anyone else who is around who's more than human. So sure, I would miss human contact and company, but survival and thriving, as you were saying, it's not just about having what we need. It's feeling deeply connected. And this is so much of my work. It's not about reconnecting. There's so much in this world right now, and it annoys me so much. People talk about reconnecting with nature. No, 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 no. You are dissolving the illusion of disconnect that you've had in the first place. You were
Mm,
never disconnected to start with. You
mm.
are nature. You already are connected. And we just need to get over this. I'd say just, it's easier said than done. But it's this mental construct that we have that
This
when we could
conditioned
dissolve that,
mind, this condition, we've been
exactly.
conditioned that way.
Exactly. And this is, I think, this is what I was alluding to early on, is I don't want to get too much into it, but there's been a deliberate programming of that illusion
Yeah.
to think that we are disconnected. And
Yeah.
so when we remember, that is the greatest power that we can
Oh,
have, because
well,
suddenly you're like, huh, I don't have to be limited in my life anymore.
you are special, Saskia von Diest. You are special. Seriously. Now, everyone, we are displaying her website, contact details, Saskia. On your website are all the workshops and how they can contact you if they need, guidance from you or a session with you. All that they can contact you directly, correct? And it's all on the website? Yeah.
It's all on the website, ecofluency.org. Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I have one more thing to ask you, Saskia, before I let go of you, and I don't want to let go of you. It's like I wish we had a whole weekend together where you
We
and I
have
could
time.
just talk about this. Maybe when I come to South Africa, I'll get a cabin somewhere, in the hills. The hills are beautiful, the Drakensberg, and oh, I've been,
Oh, yeah.
oh yeah, I've been around, and my soul is there. So when I go back and reconnect with my soul, I'll give you a call, and we shall meet. Saskia, in your experience, how can this approach help animals, especially pets with behavioral or health challenges? Like this one. This one has health challenges. 17.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, he has
It's
it
so
all.
cute.
Oh, yeah. Are you cute? Yeah, okay.
Oh, he knows it as
Mhm.
well, sweetie
Mhm.
pie.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay. So how can I help
So
this guy?
it's a really important question because it actually brings me to something that I'm going to say, which might make me a little bit unpopular, which is that what nature communication has revealed to me is that it's the humans who often have behavioral or health challenges that the
Absolutely.
animals are
Yes.
mirroring.
It's a fact.
Yes.
Fact.
So, in my experience, the animals are very generous in wanting to support the entire family system. So, I've noticed how clients will, that their animals will start developing symptoms that are exactly the same as what a particular family member is going through, but is ignoring. And they're doing their best to show you what it is that you need to know. Like a puppy who develops cancer, and then a few months later, their person dies of cancer because she never bothered to get checked when she had started to having symptoms or pain of any kind. Or a client of mine who, where her horse developed really severe hoof issues, and turns out that the horse was not interested in speaking about his health. He wanted to speak about his person not being able to move out of the house she was living in with her ex, and it's blocking her chances of moving on. Like she literally can't step out of the situation. So other times animals will develop what we call behavioral issues because they're showing us how you feel actually, like a child who's throwing a tantrum because actually it's the mother's inner child who would like to do this herself but can't. So with nature communication, one can ask what's really going on for an animal. And it can be, there are a few things that I want to mention with this in particular. The first is that it really helps to approach the initial conversation with an animal purely with curiosity. And I do mean conversation. It to avoid it being an interrogation, because the first thing that people often want to know is, why are you scratching my furniture? Why are you throwing up on the pillow where I put my head, for example? And it's like, sure, those are perfectly valid questions. And the word why is quite loaded. And this is what people forget, is that no matter the tone we use, even if I were to say, why are you scratching the furniture? the animal will feel judged and then they'll turn away, just like a human. So instead, I would recommend asking to open the conversation with, what would you like to share? And this is where it helps having an external person, because it can be quite difficult doing this with your own animal because we're, emotionally invested, we're entangled there. So when we're using an open question, not a closed one like a yes, no, maybe kind of answers question, if we say, what would you like to share, rather than do you want to share anything, then they can choose themselves whether they want to say what they want to share. Because we're first wanting to establish trust, rapport, curiosity about how the animal is really doing, regardless of the behavioral issue. And then often the result is that you find out what's going on without having to even speak about the behavioral issue, because they'll tell you themselves. They'll be like, I am literally pissed off. That's why I'm peeing on your furniture. Sorry, my language. So then at some point late in the conversation, we could ask, what makes you want to scratch the furniture? Which is different to, why do you scratch the furniture? Or what is your reasoning for throwing up on the pillows?
Mhm.
Rather than, why do you throw up on the pillow? And then the animal is more likely going to be willing to share.
Mm.
And then getting really to the bottom of it becomes possible. And the second thing I want to say is that when you're approaching the conversation without an expectation of change and phrasing everything in the way that you want rather than what you don't want,
Mhm.
then you're most likely going to have more success. For example, when I tell an animal, don't jump up, there's something that gets lost in the translation when the message is being sent to the animal. So all they hear is jump up,
Yeah.
but with a negative connotation, and it's confusing for them. So instead, I will give them reasons and incentive about what it is that I would like to see. After I've explored what makes you want to jump up, and the animal might say something like, I'm really excited to see my human, or I want to be on your eye level, or that's just you're walking on your hind legs, so I want to do the same, whatever the reason. So then you could be like, thank you for sharing. I hear you. When you jump up, it can damage my clothes. Your nails are sharp, your paws are dirty. I find it overwhelming as a human. You could say all of these things and describe it from your perspective, your experience and point of view. And then you could say, and so I would prefer if you were to keep your paws on the ground.
Mm. Mhm.
So I'm not saying don't jump up. I'm saying when you do this, this is what happens for me. I would prefer this. And nowhere, not once in that description, am I using the words no or don't.
Mm.
And so this is works really well with other humans, by the way, especially children.
Absolutely.
You
Yes.
want to get them to do
Yes.
something you want them to do, but starting out from a place of curiosity and zero expectation. But the most emotionally challenging consultations I've had are with animals who are at the end of their lives or
Yeah.
are very ill,
Yeah.
beyond recovery.
Yeah.
And I've had with a particular client's dog, on an ego personality level, they weren't ready to let go of their body because they really enjoyed food and eating too
Correct.
much. You
Yeah.
want to let go. But
Yeah.
then on another level, their highest self, their eternal spirit, they were ready to let go, but they needed help to leave the body. They couldn't do it themselves, and so they needed euthanasia. And that in particular, that consultation was very difficult to convey to the client. And I hesitated because I wasn't even sure how I felt about this. Like, I would never have considered euthanasia myself before, but it was a huge relief because these particular clients said that this had been their intuitive feeling and they just wanted validation for what they were already experiencing, but they didn't want to influence what I was getting. So it was ironic that I actually ended up getting the validation I needed. Um, and so I had to reevaluate my entire worldview about what was right and wrong. So they did end up going through with that process in a very loving way in their home, and the dog passed, peacefully, and all his people were around him. And I had a consultation with the same dog after he died a few months later because the client wanted to know how he's doing. And I was really blown away by what I saw. So I saw that his spirit was now in the form of an eighth dimensional whale having a grand time. And I'd never seen anything like that. And there's obviously no way that I can validate that because, unless I hired maybe another psychic to tune into the same animal spirit. But I figured that it must be real because in my imagination is not that far out that I would choose to think of a dog spirit
Eight
now, an eighth dimensional
dimensional
whale.
whale.
Sorry.
My
And at the
goodness.
time, I didn't even know about different dimensions. But the clients really resonated with this information and they felt at peace. So I was happy that I got to have, as a nature communicator, I got to have that experience for my own learning journey.
Incredible.
So when we have these kinds of consultations and I invite curiosity and I invite letting go of expectation, like I said, it's easier said than done because we are emotionally entangled with our animals in the same way that we're emotionally entangled with our family of origin, our siblings and our parents and so on. We're invested in a particular outcome as well. So this is why many people, including professional animal communicators, will ask for help from the outside, like for a mediator. But I would just recommend that people do hold on to positive phrasing and choosing an incentive that they're able to describe for the animal. And and this is not just so I tried this actually at a retreat where I taught a few years ago, and the manager's dog kept jumping up. And so I used the same example that I was, describing earlier on, and I gently explained to the dog why I and everyone else would prefer to greet her when she kept her paws on the ground.
Mm.
And afterwards, she did exactly that, and the manager was
Wow.
surprised that to see her dog's behavior had changed so quickly and without training. And that is important to note is that not that training is bad. It can be incredibly useful. It can be like making sure a dog stays to heel when you're out walking can also be good for the dog's safety when, for example, crossing a street or encountering other animals. But if you're using nature communication, it can really help to augment and accelerate that process, that learning journey for both humans and animals by getting the dog on board as an invested stakeholder in that journey, in that process of decision making. And so when I see people starting to use nature communication more consciously with their animal, there's a deepening of trust that happens in the relationship. There's like an understanding of what each of the beings are going through, as would happen with any relationship where there's more honest communication. So you see them beyond their physical form. You get to be clearer mirrors for each other so that your spirits can evolve more quickly and beautifully with the support that comes from all of nature. And it
Mm.
also helps to expand your worldview because you start to become curious about the different levels of being that not only an animal has, but the entire nature of reality. So you're not just nurturing your pet, you're nurturing your nature.
Saskia, you really, really nice. This has been one of the most feel good interviews, chats I've had. Why? Because because it's out there and I feel I haven't tapped into all those beautiful beings, all those beautiful living souls that are right here, right around me.
Yeah,
We're always seeking out there. Of course, I live with 5 dogs. I have them all around, but yeah, there's more. There's much more. And I want to explore more of that. I've always, whenever there's a full moon, I always say, oh, today I have a date with the moon. And then I'll have dinner and I'll look at the moon. And where I sleep, I see the moon outside my window. And I say, hi, just hello, moon. But I never felt that the moon would hear me. You know, I never felt the moon or the tree would hear me. So, Saskia, thank you. And will you guide us into a beautiful prayer before you leave?
yeah, I'd be happy to. Sorry. I invite you to bring attention to your breath and allow that your belly is relaxed. Let your belly expand as you breathe in, letting more air be drawn into your lungs. Let your belly button go back towards your spine as you breathe out in a natural way, letting the breath become slower, longer, deeper. Let your spine rise up from the base, from the bowl of your hips, like it's a young tree. Let your shoulders be gently rolled backwards and downwards, allowing spaciousness across the chest and the heart area. Let your head float above your neck and your shoulders. Your jaw be soft, your eyes rest lightly closed. Notice how you feel in your body right now. I'm going to say some words that I call a greeting. Others might think of as a prayer, an invocation, a blessing. Think of them as words that are aimed at being nourishment for your soul and the soul of the entire universe. Hear us now, please, grandmothers, grandfathers, those who are human and more than human, those beings who are wise, benevolent, kind, who love, honor, and respect us, those ancestors, spirits, and guardians of place from the land on which we each sit, those who come from the east, the south, the west, the north, from the air and the fire, water and earth, from below and the underworlds, from above and the upper worlds, from inside. To our spirit teams, guardians, guides, and allies, known and unknown, we ask you to be with us as well. And all of those who we've greeted, who we've called, we offer gratitude that we have this life. And what a crazy time to be alive, but nonetheless, grateful for our life. Grateful for the lives of the beings who we share. Share our homes with. In all our endeavors, we ask that you bring necessary clarity, guidance, guardianship. I ask that for all of those beings who are listening, human and more than human, please help us to make sure that our decisions in our lives are always aligned with greater love and harmony, abundance and joy, peace, and above all, with grace, compassion for all of life on this truly beloved earth of ours, including herself, and beyond throughout all time and dimensions. Let it be so. And so it is. Notice how you feel in your body right now. If your eyes aren't already open, allow them to blink open and stay curious about how your body listens to all of nature.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. With this, I will leave you because I feel so good. And thank you for this wonderful chat. Thank you so much. And we will have you soon again because this is a subject that's not only important, but very, very special. Thank you, Saskia.
Thank you, Nita, and thank you to everyone listening.